Hey everyone, this is Ryan.
And Trent.
And we're here today to show you some progressions of how to start incorporating some hand-eye coordination drills using just a ball and a ping pong paddle. So a lot of the time we hear about the benefits of ping pong, but some people may be thinking, well, what if I don't have access to a table or a virtual reality headset or a partner, or I just want to practice my coordination skills in the context of my own health and wellness, and I want to be able to incorporate these coordinative or neuromotor activities into my daily life, into my existing exercise program, and we want to use ping pong as a medium for doing that. And so we're just going to be going over some drills that we can use that are going to go over ball balancing drills, ball bouncing drills. We're going to do some things with our lower body having to do with static and dynamic balance. And we're going to mix and match these to create the exercise flavors that we're looking for and hopefully get ourselves at a place that's not too challenging and not too easy, and we're in that nice flow state, that balance of challenge and skills. But we're going to show you progressions such that as we go along, that we can always increase our challenge, since hopefully we're increasing our skill. We're getting better. The brain is a very learning organ, and hopefully this may even translate to improving your ping pong performance, or even better, improving your quality of life, your cognition, and or your motor ability in your everyday life. That's the biggest hope for doing these types of activities. So that could be, disease modifying, such as in Parkinson's disease, or it could just be in the context of normal healthy aging. So anything else you wanted to say before we got started?
No, I like that whole idea of the progression, and I'd like to start there with, that I can take this anywhere.
Right, exactly. So I think it's helpful to acknowledge the equipment we have. It may be obvious, but we have a ping pong ball and we have a paddle of your choice. Now, we don't even need to use the paddle. A lot of what we can do has to just use the ping pong ball. So just working on basic hand-eye coordination drills, tossing it from one hand to the other, tossing it to the same hand, working with different lengths. And this may seem easy, but because the ping pong ball is so small, you have to work on grasping. And it's a little bit more challenging to do.
Ryan, does it matter what color it is?
It may. So if we have more than one ball, we might mix it up a little bit. Some people have color blindness or different changes in their vision. We can extend how far it is away from us. We can get closer together. We can toss it forward, toss it backwards, toss it back and forth, toss it a little bit higher, bounce it off a wall. There's a lot of different things that we can do with just the ping pong ball. But assuming that we're going to be using the ping pong ball and the paddle, let's go over some drills to use for both of those. I think one of the most interesting things that we can do for learning paddle control and learning hand-eye coordination and anticipation is ball balancing. And ball balancing is when we have the ball right on the center of the racket and we try to keep it still. Now, this may be challenging for some people, whether you have a tremor or you over-anticipate and you're not really sure how to self-organize around what seems to be very simple but can be very challenging. And so there's several ways to get yourself to successfully ball balance. Trent, you're an experienced player. I've done this quite a bit before, so I've had some practice. We might make it look easy for you, but here's how to get to some ball balancing drills and improve your capabilities. So we start with what's called the cage. We sort of make this thing with our hand and we put it right on the paddle. So it's literally a cage if you're putting it, and you just expand your fingers a little bit and try to stop the ball. You're not pressing on the paddle with your hand on top, but try to stop the ball from touching your fingers. And this helps you get a sense of centralizing the ball within the balancing drill. And then you can expand your fingers a little bit. And then maybe you can take your fingers away, maybe hover above the paddle and be ready to catch it as it almost rolls off the edge if that happens to you. And then if you feel comfortable, you can hold your hand towards the bottom, anticipating where it might fall off the edge if it does fall.
Ryan, I noticed on your paddle you've got that sort of that speckled surface. Does that make a difference?
It may make a difference. So the grip may make a difference if it's smooth, if it's speckled. But certainly I think, generally speaking, we're going to have probably a similar result here.
Right.
The thickness of the paddle might matter, and also the way you're gripping the paddle. So I have my finger at the back, but if you're holding here, loose, tight, it's going to change the dynamics of this. I'm also underhand right now. I could be pronated or overhand, and that will also change what's going on. The direction of the paddle, I could be more in front versus inside what I just showed you. This would be more inside.
A little tougher to control, it seems, when you're pronated.
Exactly. And eventually, or we don't have to say it eventually, but more advanced players will roll it from back to front. That's a very challenging task. We're not going to do that right now.
Right.
So we just have the ball balancing and getting competent with that. Once again, catching it if it falls off, keeping an extra ball or two in your pocket so you don't have to bend over and pick it up every single time you might drop it. And so let's assume that we are now proficient in ball balancing. We can keep this on for, say, 5 seconds, and then 10 seconds, and then 15 seconds. Even counting is a simultaneous cognitive activity while you're just standing still. You can also do this sitting down. You could do it on a table such that if you drop it, it goes right on the table. So now we're going to continue on with this ball balancing drill, and we're going to see how can we progress this a little bit. Certainly the ball balancing when standing still, if you can just keep it still for 10 to 20 seconds, certainly you're going to have some fatigue, some variability in how you control the paddle. But what if this is too easy for us now? We have to increase the physical demand a little bit. Now you notice we're not really doing anything with our lower body. So if you're seated, maybe standing up, working on some postural control as it relates to this motor task might be good. But let's try to increase the physical demand of this a little bit. We're going to increase our postural stability demands by decreasing our base of support. So if you missed it, I was standing hip width apart. Now my feet just come in a little bit more. They don't have to touch yet. And even though this might not look like much, if you have instability or you have trouble with reducing your base of support, we're just moving your feet in a little bit can make this a little bit more challenging. Now, as this is occurring, you want to be safe. So I want to have a chair next to me to hold on to or just float my hand just in case. Maybe someone next to me, maybe a wall. I could turn towards the wall, have my back against the wall if that's something that I feel safer with in case I fall backwards. And so you always want to exercise safety as much as possible. And so reducing the base of support, it's up to you the level in which you do that. Ideally eventually we get to, oh, you got another one there, you're prepared. You get eventually to keeping your feet all the way together. So my toes and my heels are touching. This is very demanding. We'll see that the ball balancing task actually gets harder for us. And we want to make sure that as we are decreasing our base of support, that we're remaining safe with a chair or someone next to us or a wall, because we are distracted while we're balancing.
Absolutely.
We are distracted, and so we don't want to fall under that distraction.
Focus is on the ball.
That's right. You're not focusing on your feet. And so now we can go from if my hands are my feet were together, now we can slide it forward and go semi-tandem stance. So this one can be a little tricky, so your heel is inside your toe, essentially. Definitely recommend holding on to a chair, the wall, or someone else during this task. It's going to be harder because we're trying to not lean over to one side as this becomes more challenging. And certainly the ball might go everywhere. And just as we were first learning that ball balancing, keeping your hand underneath, certainly this is going to be harder for us. So we expect that ball balancing to decrease in its performance and our ability to keep it on the paddle.
Yeah, and I just have my fingers lightly on the wall. I don't need a lot of support there.
Right.
Just a touch.
And we're standing forward, but ideally you're standing to the side so that wall you can touch at any time. Okay? So now that we've done that, these are slippery guys. So now that we've done that, we can go full tandem. So we did semi-tandem. This one's going to be harder. Definitely hold on to something as you get in this position. Your heel in front of your toe. Okay, so Trent's showing us that there. Our heel is in front of our toe. This one is very challenging. Once again, strongly recommend you're holding onto a chair or a wall during this exercise. You're going to feel a lot of ankle activity. And then maybe after 20 seconds, maybe even 5 seconds, if that's all you can do, the amount of time is going to depend on your ability level and your endurance. You can switch sides. And then if we feel comfortable holding onto a chair or wall, we get in this position where we're putting most of the weight on one leg. Oh, you're still up in the tandem there.
No, but it was
you're loving it.
More challenging the other way.
Yeah.
With the right foot forward.
Right, you're going to have a dominant side, a non-dominant side.
Yeah, quite clear that the other way was a lot easier.
Right.
I'm just tending to lean almost toward you.
And so you're actually going to see that reflected in the ball and paddle a little bit. You might counteract or overreact. So that's going to be interesting to see. So now let's keep going with our static balance. We're going to, there you got one, there you go. We're going to work on single leg supported, ideally with a chair here or the wall supporting you. My left toe in this case is just kissing the ground. So I'm gonna get with most of my weight, 60 to 80% of my weight on my right foot. My left toe is kissing the ground. Trent, why don't you come a little closer? Okay, touch that toe down, you're just kissing the ground with that toe. And certainly if we get distracted, we're gonna find that the ball balancing performance will decrease a bit. Okay, and if I feel comfortable, ideally with support, initially, I can float that foot. This one's a real doozy. And if you can do single leg stance without this, ideally you should be able to do any movement without the ball balancing before introducing the ball balancing. So if I can't do single leg on my own, I shouldn't do it with ball balancing. If I can't do semi-tandem on my own, I shouldn't do it with ball balancing. That's a good measure. So we're gonna find that these are much harder to maintain because our eyes and our brain are working so much harder to keep this afloat while I'm balancing. How are you feeling with this one?
It's tough. It's getting tough to maintain it, just even to keep the right leg.
Right. And what we can do is touch that toe down after any time where we want a bit of a rest or just rest completely. It's okay to rest. Okay. So that concludes the majority of our static balance. The question is, can we introduce more dynamic balance? So static balance is where I'm trying to maintain a position. So if you put your hand on the chair, you go on a single leg, that's static balance. That has a lot of value. Once again, we don't want to do anything that is so challenging for us without the ball balancing that we end up falling and hurting ourselves just because we see an exercise here. But let's work on dynamic balance. Most of the world is dynamic balance. We're reacting to the world around us, right? So what can we do with ball balancing that's more dynamic balance? Well, one thing that we can start doing is just tiny marches in place. Okay, and marching in place seems very simple, and it is, but there's so much you can do with it. You can start to go higher knees, and you're gonna see how your movement's reflected in the paddle here, and you have to react to that. You can go lighter on your feet. You can go faster with your feet. You can really go super slow motion, which is almost a transferring of single leg balance, depending on how slow you go. Okay, and making sure to have a chair next to you at all times and being able to catch the ball or have an extra ball in your pocket just in case. So marching, very nice dynamic balance task. And now we can start stepping in different directions. So tiny little steps left to right. Okay, we can go bigger with those steps. So Trent, I'm gonna let you do that. Go bigger with those steps. Good. Okay, good. And now we can also do stepping in different directions, forward and back, for instance. You're going to see translation of the ball on the paddle with the forward and back stepping. And the goal is to counteract that with the movement of your hand at the paddle. Of course, you can go bigger, and at any point you feel dizzy or unstable, stop, grab a chair, slow down, take some deep breaths. Okay, we can also go diagonals. So if we imagine a clock around us, we've gone forward, backwards, we went to 12, 6, 3, 9. We can go to 1 or 2 over here, right? What's down here? 5,
4 or 5,
4 or 5,
11,
11, 10 or 11, and then what's
8.
down? 7 or 8, exactly. So you can go diagonal, you can go forward, side to side. You can step and go to each order of the clock and clockwise and then counterclockwise. That's a nice way to get a lot of multi-directional movement. And the speed and the distance in which you step is completely modifiable. If you want to increase the speed at which you're doing this or the distance in which you're stepping to work on more weight transfer, dynamic balance, you can most certainly do that.
It's also a little tougher when you have to start thinking about where the clock is.
Where the clock is, it's a little bit more of a cognitive demand. And returning to the middle after each step is another consideration here. So there's more memory demand attached to this type of activity.
Man overboard.
Yeah, Certainly talking while doing this is an additional cognitive demand as well. So now let's move on to some other dynamic balance tasks. So continue with the ball balancing. We can do tiny little quarter turns. And they're not even quarter turns, they're even smaller than that. Really being cautious of dizziness, recognizing that our eyes are on the ball and our bodies are moving as our eyes are on the ball. This is called gaze stabilization. And this can certainly cause dizziness in some people. So if you're dizzy, make the movement smaller or stop and sit down. In fact, any time you feel really dizzy after this, just stop completely. You might have an inner ear or vestibular issue. Consult your doctor or a vestibular physical therapist about that. And certainly if you want to make the turns a little bigger, you may. We don't recommend going beyond half a turn. Some people, if they do not have dizziness or inner ear issues, can tolerate full rotations. Very, very challenging.
Yeah, I found when I did the full rotation, I got just a little bit of dizziness.
Little bit of dizziness. So it's really important to approach that with caution. So we have quarter turns. Now we can incorporate the marching with a slight turn as well. Trent's getting some extra turn in there, which is great. And you can see this really requires your visual attention.
Yeah, there's a lot more going on now.
Yes. Okay, let's face forward. So that was a bit of a marching with the turn. Now we can also work on stepping a little bit further, and it's almost more like a baby lunge. It's more of a long step with a weight transfer than it is a lunge. We're not really looking for lunging itself. That is very challenging to do. And stepping to different areas of that clock, starting with left, right, forward, back, diagonal, going clockwise, counterclockwise. Now this bigger step, you're gonna see a lot more movement of the ball because of that weight transfer that you have to counteract for. What do you think of that one?
Yeah, major adjustment on the ball on this one.
Major adjustment. Good.
It's probably about double what it was on the previous ones.
Yep. All right, so now let's work on moving from ball balancing, which is more of a endurance motor task. You got to keep it on there. And we're just seeing how many seconds we can keep it on there. For introducing stepping, how many steps we get, counting the steps, or you can just set a timer for 30 to 60 seconds and see where you end up with some of this stuff before the ball falls off. And that way you know how to modify the amount of time you're doing these drills for, how many reps you're doing these drills for.
And you can even measure against your personal best if you just want to have a little
There
fun
you go.
with it.
Measure your personal best against how long you can keep the ball balancing by itself, and then adding in, hey, I added a semi-tandem and I was able to do that for 30 seconds. When I first started, I could barely do 5 seconds. Now I'm at 60 seconds with a semi-tandem.
Absolutely.
So that's a great way to go about it. But we also want to look at more dynamic hand-eye coordination. So we're going to work on ball bouncing. So if I just toss the ball, bounce off my racket, and catch it, that's a pretty good hand-eye coordination drill. We're just going to start with one. This helps learn ball control, where to have the paddle contact the ball, your anticipation skills. Okay, so that's just one bounce. If we can do that well, maybe about 10 to 20 times, now it's time to progress to 2 bounces. Good. And then if we can do that, 3 bounces. And then 4 bounces. And we can do that all the way up till we get to 10 bounces, right? 5, and then go to 6, and 7, 8, 9, and 10. Don't rush to get there. And then if we're quite good at that, we can go bounce, catch, flip, bounce, catch, flip, bounce, catch, flip, bounce, catch, flip. Just like that. Now, if we really want to go for this, we go bounce, flip, bounce, catch. So pronation helps with racket control, switching between forehand and backhand. Aha, I got an extra one in there. And following that same line of thinking, 1, 2, 1, 2, catch. Or simply I could say, how many times can I go till failure? And you're gonna find your postural control is adopting to wherever that ball may go. Pretty challenging. Okay, so now we're gonna move on we've seen all the variations of ball bouncing. We can see what's the maximum number we can get without dropping it. We can go till failure. We can switch. We can catch, switch, bounce, catch. We have all sorts of different options for this. The same motor patterns that we did down below. So if we want to, let's just say we're doing a continuous bounce or a 3 bounce for the sake of these exercises. Okay. Put your feet together. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Then we'll go semi-tandem. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now, not forgetting about that chair should we need it. Of course, it's more challenging because you need a hand to serve yourself the ball. Right. So if you really want to stabilize yourself, if I'm having my right foot forward, the logical direction I could fall is this way, to my left. So it's always good to have your shoulder barely touching, if at all, the wall. Of course, you don't want your paddle to hit that. Most of the control will be on your right side if it's in your right hand. And that way, if you fall, you can fall into the wall. You're okay, right? You can also turn this way and serve it to yourself. And as soon as you serve it to yourself, put your hand on the chair. And if the ball goes, the ball goes. You have another one in your pocket, or you pick it up and do it again, right? So that's a great way to challenge yourself while still staying safe. We can also increase the demand to go to tandem, remembering that there's an additional hand-eye coordination drill or demand on top of this. Your hands are moving, your eyes are moving, there's a lot more dynamic control. We would consider this to be more challenging. So because you're reaching outside your base of support, you are at a higher risk for falling, therefore the increased concern for safety.
Yeah, the full tandem, I'd say, is twice as difficult as the staggered.
Very difficult.
For me.
For you. And let's say we go single leg. So Trent, for this one, I'd recommend you serve it to yourself. And as soon as you've served it to yourself, put your hand on the chair for this one. We go single leg. Really challenging. So we're going to see either the balance task. Certainly nobody wants to fall. So we're going to prioritize the balance task over this. But this is going to help divide our attention a little bit, work on hand-eye coordination and balance. Good.
Better for the ball to fall than for you to fall.
Exactly. Very well said. So now we're going to introduce that dynamic balance. So the stepping in multiple directions. Okay, left, right, forward, back, diagonals. And we're going to be experimenting with the clock, if you will. Going clockwise, counterclockwise, experimenting with the speed and the depth or the distance of those steps. This one's very challenging because you're essentially traveling. And there's two things traveling: the ball, the paddle, and your body. And you have to organize all of them. This is going to really help with coordination. It's going to help with footwork. It's going to help with visual attention. A lot of great benefits here. All right, buddy. Good stuff. Of course, we can reintroduce the marching in place here. Oop, that was easy. Marching in place, marching with the turns, and we can even go ambulatory a little bit. Start walking back and forth, almost as Trent was starting to do, where he was moving, but instead of moving back to that central point, actually taking several steps in one direction and then coming back. Great.
All right.
Awesome work. And so those are great series of exercises to go from ball balancing to ball bouncing, all the way to static balance to dynamic balance, looking at head turns, movements, lots of different combinations for you today.
Yeah, I think that could do you for weeks.
Exactly. Starting with the easiest and scaling yourself up with endurance, and then progressing yourself to a more balancing challenging balance task, or a more challenging motor task, and sort of managing how you're mixing and matching those together.
Yeah. Even though I played a lot of ping pong, especially recently, this is a challenge, and this is pretty simple stuff.
Absolutely. Seemingly. When you get to the crux of it and you start to, take a challenging balance exercise with a challenging motor task, it certainly becomes a lot more difficult.
Absolutely.
So we're going to have a handout for you to look at. both digitally, you can print this out, in which we show you the easiest to hardest motor tasks, the easiest to hardest balance tasks or dynamic balance tasks to pair with these movements. We're going to show you different combinations, different suggestions for sets, reps, how much time you're doing this for, different progressions and regressions. Why is a small step harder than or easier than a bigger step in some cases? So we're going to be giving you these resources to help structure your exercise program. Of course, giving you sample programs, beginner, intermediate, and advanced to start with, generally speaking, and also providing more videos of a beginner, intermediate, and advanced ping pong workout, if you will. And then the other thing we want to be considerate of is how we actually incorporate this into everyday life. If you're going to be playing ping pong, you can use this as a warm-up. If you have a 30 to 60 minute workout, you can use this as a 5 to 30 minute component of your workout. That's more of the neuromotor or coordinative aspect of your exercise. You can do it throughout the day. Heck, I do it on business calls sometimes just for fun and to keep myself engaged. Do it on your lunch break. If you're not at work, do it at home when you're not too busy, doing it while watching TV. There's a lot of different ways to incorporate this into your life. Of course, making sure in any environment that we're making sure that we have surfaces that we're not going to trip over or scuff our feet, little clips in a sidewalk or something in our home in which we can clip and fall over. Of course, checking with your doctor and physical therapist before continuing or participating in any of these exercises, using your best judgment, not being too competitive with yourself, not being too hard on yourself, and taking time to incorporate what we think would be some very beneficial exercises for you.
Yeah, I think you'd be pleasantly surprised at how the progress comes to if you stick to it.
The brain learns.